The reservation was made under a fake name. Table 12, right next to table 11, the same table my husband David had booked for his romantic dinner tonight. What he didn't know was that I'd be sitting 3 feet away from him, watching every lie unfold in real time. My name is Sophia Martinez, and 3 weeks ago I discovered my husband of 15 years was having an affair. Not through some dramatic confrontation or lipstick on his collar. No. I found out because he forgot to log out of his email on our shared iPad. There it was, a thread of messages with someone named Jessica, planning secret dinners, weekend, getaways and exchanges of "I love you" that made my stomach turn inside out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal. It was reading how he described our marriage to her. "Sophia and I are basically roommates at this point," he wrote. "She's so focused on her career, she barely notices I exist." Meanwhile, I'd been working 60-hour weeks at my law firm to support his dream of opening his own restaurant, a dream that was apparently funding his affair dinners. I could have confronted him immediately. I could have thrown his clothes on the lawn and changed the locks, but something inside me wanted justice, not just revenge. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation, the same shock of discovery that I felt reading those messages at 2 a.m. while he slept peacefully beside me. That's when I hatched my plan. The restaurant David chose for tonight was Bella Vista, an upscale Italian place downtown. Through his emails, I knew they had reservations for 8 p.m. every Friday, their standing date night. How romantic. How predictable. I called Bella Vista and spoke to the manager, explaining that I was planning a surprise anniversary dinner for my husband. I needed the table right next to his reservation, and I was willing to pay extra for the specific seating arrangement. The manager, charmed by what he thought was a romantic gesture, was more than happy to accommodate. But I wasn't going alone. 3. Days of detective work led me to Jessica's husband, Marcus. A quick LinkedIn search, some social media stalking, and I had his phone number. The conversation was awkward at first. Imagine calling a stranger to tell them their wife is cheating. But Marcus had suspected something for months. Jessica's late nights, mysterious weekend trips, and the way she guarded her phone had already planted seeds of doubt. "I have proof," I told him during our coffee meeting 2 days ago. "And I have a plan that will give us both the closure we need." Marcus was a quiet man, an accountant with kind eyes that reminded me of my father. He didn't want drama or confrontation, but he wanted the truth. When I showed him the email exchanges between David and his wife, I watched his face crumble in the same way mine had weeks earlier. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Just sit with me. Watch them lie to our faces one last time. Then we'll both know exactly who we're married to." Now, as I applied my lipstick in the restaurant bathroom, my hands were surprisingly steady. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. The red dress David bought me for our anniversary last year, the one he said made me look stunning. Tonight, Jessica would see exactly what he was throwing away. I walked back to table 12, where Marcus sat nervously adjusting his tie. He looked like he might bolt at any moment. "They're not here yet," he whispered, glancing toward the entrance. "They will be." "David's never late for anything that matters to him." Marcus fidgeted with his water glass. "What if this backfires? What if they see us and just leave? Then we'll know they're cowards on top of being cheaters." At exactly 8:03 p.m., I saw them walk in. David wore the navy blazer I'd given him for Christmas, and Jessica, God, she was beautiful. Tall, blonde, probably 10 years younger than me. She had that effortless elegance that made other women feel frumpy in comparison. No wonder he fell for her. They were seated at table 11, David's back to us, Jessica facing our direction. She hadn't noticed us yet. too absorbed in whatever charming thing my husband was whispering in her ear. I watched David reach across the table and take her hand, the same gesture he used to make with me during our early dating years. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Is that her?" Marcus asked, his voice strained. "That's her." Marcus stared at his wife with a mixture of heartbreak and anger. "She's wearing the necklace I bought her for her birthday last month." The irony was almost poetic. Here we were, the betrayed spouses, watching our partners parade around in gifts we'd given them while they carried on their affair. David ordered wine, an expensive bottle of Chianti that I recognized from our own anniversary dinners. Jessica laughed at something he said, throwing her head back in a way that seemed performed, like she was auditioning for the role of perfect girlfriend. "They look happy," Marcus said bitterly. "They look fake," I corrected. "Trust me, I've been married to him for 15 years. That laugh he's doing? That's his trying too hard laugh." As if to prove my point, David's laugh became even more forced when Jessica told what was obviously a story she'd told before. He was nervous. Good. The waiter approached their table, and I heard David order for both of them, something he used to do for me until I told him it was patronizing. Jessica seemed delighted by the gesture. How refreshing it must be, I thought, to be impressed by such basic dominance displays. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "When do we make our move?" Marcus whispered. "Not yet. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they're safe." I ordered another glass of wine and settled in to watch the show. David was pulling out all his best material, stories I'd heard 100 times, jokes that used to make me laugh before I realized he recycled them for every woman he wanted to. Impressed Jessica hung on every word. Either she was a phenomenal actress, or she genuinely found my husband as fascinating as he thought he was. The latter possibility was almost more insulting than the affair itself. They ordered appetizers, clinked glasses, and David even fed her a bite of bruschetta. The intimacy of it made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to watch every moment. This was evidence. This was ammunition for the divorce proceedings that would inevitably follow tonight. "I can't do this," Marcus suddenly said, starting to stand. "This is too much. I should just confront them directly." I grabbed his wrist firmly. "Sit down. If you confront them now, they'll just deny it, make up excuses, gaslight us both. We need them to dig their own graves first." Marcus reluctantly sat back down, but his leg bounced under the table with nervous energy. That's when Jessica's eyes met mine. For a split second, I saw confusion cross her face. She knew she recognized me from somewhere, but couldn't place it. I smiled pleasantly and raised my wineglass in a small toast gesture. She returned the smile uncertainly and turned back to David. But I caught her glancing back at me twice during their appetizer course. David, oblivious as usual, continued his performance. He was in full charm mode, complimenting her dress, her hair, her laugh. The same compliments he'd stopped giving me years ago, repackaged for a new audience. "She keeps looking at you," Marcus observed. "Good. Let her wonder." By the time their main courses arrived, Jessica was clearly distracted. She kept stealing glances at our table, trying to figure out why I looked familiar. David remained completely unaware, too caught up in his own performance to notice his girlfriend's discomfort. I decided it was time to escalate. Standing up smoothly, I walked past their table toward the bathroom, making sure to brush against David's chair slightly. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to create a moment of contact. In the bathroom mirror, I reapplied my lipstick and took a deep breath. Phase 2 was about to begin, and there was no going back after this. When I returned to my table, I took a different route that brought me directly into David's line of sight. Our eyes met for exactly 3 seconds. I watched the color drain from his face as recognition hit him like a freight train. His mouth fell open slightly, and he nearly dropped his fork. I smiled sweetly, the same smile I'd given him every morning for 15 years, and returned to my seat. David's head swiveled between me and Jessica, panic written across his features. Jessica noticed his sudden change in demeanor and followed his gaze to our table. When she saw me watching them calmly, her face went pale. "I think they've figured it out," Marcus whispered. "Perfect timing. Now the real show begins." I reserved the table, next to my husband's affair dinner, and brought her husband with me. Part 2, David's panic was delicious to watch. He kept glancing between Jessica and me, his mind racing to figure out how to handle this impossible situation. Should he pretend he didn't see me? Should he come over and act casual? Should he grab Jessica and run? I could practically see the wheels spinning in his head, and every second of his confusion felt like sweet vindication. Jessica, meanwhile, had figured out exactly who I was. The family photos on David's social media, the ones he thought he'd hidden well enough, had apparently made enough of an impression. She gripped her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "What do we do now?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise. "We wait. Let them make the first move." David was whispering urgently to Jessica, probably trying to explain why his wife was sitting 10 feet away from their romantic dinner. Jessica's face had gone from confusion to horror, to something that looked like anger. She kept shaking her head at whatever he was saying. Then David stood up. I watched him walk over to our table, his gait stiff and unnatural. He'd composed his face into what he probably thought was casual friendliness, but his eyes betrayed his terror. "Sophia, what a surprise seeing you here." His voice cracked slightly on the word surprise. I looked up at him with the same pleasant expression I'd wear if he were a casual acquaintance. "Hello, David. Lovely restaurant choice. The atmosphere is so intimate." His eye twitched. "What are you... are you here alone?" "Oh no," I said, gesturing to Marcus with a warm smile. "I'm here with Jessica's husband, Marcus. Marcus, meet my husband, David." The look of absolute horror that crossed David's face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning this moment. Marcus stood and extended his hand with grim politeness. "Nice to meet you, David. I've heard so much about you." David's handshake was limp, distracted. His eyes kept darting back to Jessica, who was now staring at our table with undisguised panic. We should... Jessica and I were just... David stammered. "Having dinner," I finished helpfully. "Yes, we can see that. Please don't let us interrupt your evening. Marcus and I are having such a lovely time getting acquainted." The word acquainted hit David like a physical blow. He realized that Marcus and I hadn't just accidentally run into each other. We'd planned this. We knew about them, and we'd coordinated our response. "Sophia, can we talk privately for a minute?" "I'm sorry. That would be terribly rude to Marcus. We're in the middle of dinner." I cut into my chicken with deliberate precision. "Besides, you have your own dinner companion to attend to. She looks a bit pale. You should probably check on her." David's jaw worked silently for a moment before he returned to Jessica's table. I watched him lean down and whisper something urgent in her ear. She shook her head violently, clearly wanting to leave, but David put his hand on her shoulder to keep her seated. Smart man. Running would only make them look more guilty. "You're terrifying," Marcus said with something that might have been admiration. "Remind me never to cross you." "I'm just getting started." Jessica kept stealing glances at Marcus, her husband of 8 years, the man she'd been lying to for months while she played house with mine. I wondered what she saw when she looked at him, guilt, regret, or just the inconvenience of being caught. "She looks like she might throw up," Marcus observed. "Good. She should feel sick. Do you know what she wrote in one of her emails to David? She said she felt sorry for his boring wife who doesn't appreciate what she has. Apparently, I don't appreciate him enough. Marcus's face darkened. She said that? Among other things. She also mentioned how refreshing it was to be with a man who wasn't emotionally unavailable like her husband. I looked at Marcus meaningfully. I believe she was referring to you. The hurt in Marcus's eyes was immediate and raw. Emotionally unavailable? I've been trying to connect with her for months. I thought she was just going through a rough patch with work stress. Work stress, I repeated. Is that what she called it? Our waiter approached, clearly sensing the tension but professionally ignoring it. How is everything this evening? Wonderful, I said brightly. Could we get another bottle of wine? Something expensive? We're celebrating. Celebrating what? David called from the next table, unable to help himself. I turned to face him fully. New beginnings, fresh starts, the end of lies, and the beginning of truth. You know how it is, darling. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better. Jessica finally found her voice. David, I want to leave. Now. But David, in a move that proved he was either very brave or very stupid, stood up and walked back to our table. Okay, Sophia, you've made your point. You know about Jessica and me. Can we please handle this like adults? Adults, I laughed, and it came out sharper than I intended. You want to talk about acting like adults? Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back for months. Adults don't lie about working late while they're actually having romantic dinners. Adults don't tell their mistress that their wife is boring and unappreciative. David flinched. At each accusation, it's more complicated than that. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty simple. You got bored with your wife, found someone who made you feel important again, and decided to have your cake and eat it too. The only complicated part was keeping track of all your lies. Other diners were starting to notice the drama unfolding. I could see heads turning, conversations quieting as people strained to listen to our increasingly heated exchange. Jessica appeared at David's side, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. This is inappropriate. Whatever issues you two have should be handled privately. I stood up slowly, facing her directly for the first time. She was even more beautiful up close, which somehow made everything worse. Inappropriate? I repeated. You've been sleeping with my husband for months, and you think I'm being inappropriate? That's between David and you, Jessica said, but her voice wavered. Is it? Because last time I checked, adultery requires two people. You made it my business. The moment you decided to help destroy my marriage, Marcus finally spoke up, his voice quiet but steady. Jess, how long? Jessica's composure cracked when she heard her husband's voice. Marcus, this isn't how I wanted you to find out. How long? He repeated. 4 months, David answered, when Jessica couldn't. It started 4 months ago. Marcus absorbed this information like a physical blow. 4 months of lies, 4 months of his wife coming home and kissing him hello after spending the evening with another man. 4 months, Marcus repeated numbly. Our anniversary was 3 months ago. You were with him while we were planning our anniversary dinner. Jessica's tears started then, but they felt calculated somehow, strategic crying to deflect from having to answer difficult questions. I never meant for this to happen, she said. It developed naturally. Naturally? I couldn't help myself. What's natural about pursuing a married man? What's natural about lying to your husband every day for 4 months? You don't understand, Jessica shot back, her defensiveness flaring. Your marriage was already over. David told me you two were basically strangers living in the same house. And you believed him? You believed that a man who would cheat on His wife of 15 years was giving you the whole truth about his marriage? The restaurant had gone almost completely quiet now. Even the kitchen seemed to have paused its usual clattering. We were the evening's entertainment, a live-action soap opera playing out over dinner. David looked around nervously at all the watching faces. "Can we please take this outside?" "No," I said firmly. "You chose this restaurant. You chose this public venue for your romantic dinners. If you didn't want a public confrontation, you shouldn't have conducted a public affair. Sophia, please, don't." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare please me. Don't you dare ask me for consideration or courtesy when you've spent months making a fool of me." The waiter appeared again, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Excuse me, but we're receiving complaints from other guests. Perhaps we'll be leaving shortly," I assured him. Then I turned back to David and Jessica. "But first, I have something for you." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were printed copies of every email, every text message, every romantic exchange I'd been able to recover from David's various accounts. "Divorce papers," I announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I had them drawn up this week. You'll notice I'm asking for everything. The house, the cars, half your business, and maximum alimony. Adultery is still considered grounds for fault-based divorce in this state, and I have enough evidence to ensure you lose everything." David's face went white. "Sophia, you can't be serious. Let's talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" I laughed. "You want to talk rationally now? Where was rationality when you were spending our joint savings on romantic dinners? Where was rationality when you were telling another woman you loved her while coming home to me every night?" I turned to Marcus, who had been sitting in stunned silence through this entire exchange. "Marcus, I have copies of everything for you too if you want them. Text messages, emails, photos they sent each other. Everything you need for your own divorce proceedings." Marcus looked at the envelope like it contained poison. I don't know if I want to see them." "You should," I said gently. "Not because you want to torture yourself, but because you deserve to know the truth about what they were saying about you, about us, about our marriages." Jessica was crying openly now, but her tears only made me angrier. "You don't get to cry," I told her. "You don't get to be the victim here. You made your choices and now you get to live with the consequences." "I love him," she said desperately. "I know it started wrong, but I really love him." "You love the version of him that doesn't exist," I replied. "You love the David who takes you to expensive dinners and tells you everything you want to hear. You've never seen the David who leaves dirty dishes in the sink for weeks, or who promises to fix things around the house and never follows through, or who becomes a completely different person when he's stressed about money." I looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, with something that might have been pity. She doesn't know that you're only charming when you're trying to impress someone new. She doesn't know that the romance fades fast once you feel secure. She's about to find out what I learned 15 years ago, that you're much better at the chase than you are at the commitment. David's mouth opened and closed uselessly. There was nothing he could say because everything I'd said was true, and he knew it. The manager appeared then, flanked by 2 servers. The show was over. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you all to leave," he said politely but firmly. "We can't have this kind of disturbance in the restaurant." "Of course," I said graciously. "We've said everything we needed to say anyway." I gathered my purse and stood up, leaving the divorce papers on the table for David to collect. Marcus stood beside me, still looking shell-shocked, but somehow more resolved than when we'd arrived. As we walked toward the exit, I heard Jessica pleading with David behind us. "What are we going to do? What happens now?" His response was lost in the noise of the restaurant returning to normal, but I didn't need to hear it. I knew exactly what would happen now. Outside on the sidewalk, Marcus and I stood in the cool evening air, both of us processing what had just occurred. "Thank you," he said quietly. I know this was hard for you too, but thank you for letting me be here for this. Thank you for having the courage to face it with me. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who had just watched their marriages implode in spectacular fashion. What now? Marcus asked. I looked back at the restaurant where David and Jessica were probably still figuring out how to salvage their evening and their relationship. Now we go home and start figuring out who we are without them. But as I walked to my car, I realized the night wasn't over yet. There was still one more move to make, one final piece of my plan that would ensure David and Jessica never forgot this evening. The real surprise was still coming. I reserved the table next to my husband's affair dinner and brought her husband. With me, Part 3. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for what I knew would be one of the last times. David hadn't come home the night before, no surprise there. He was probably holed up at Jessica's apartment, trying to figure out how to spin the disaster at Bella Vista into something that wasn't entirely their fault. My phone had 17 missed calls from him and a string of increasingly desperate text messages. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Marcus had texted me once around midnight. Thank you again. I couldn't have done that alone. Neither could I thought as I made my morning coffee in the kitchen. David and I had renovated together 3 years ago. Everything in this house held memories of a marriage that had apparently been dying while I was too busy working to notice. But I wasn't dwelling on the past today. Today was about executing the final phase of my plan. I called my office and took a personal day, then drove to the one place I knew David would have to show up eventually. His restaurant. The irony wasn't lost on me that the business I'd helped fund was about to become the stage for the final act of our marriage's destruction. Martinelli's Bistro was David's dream made real, a cozy Italian place in the arts district that he'd opened 2 years ago with a loan I'd co-signed and savings I'd helped accumulate. The lunch crowd was just starting to filter in when I arrived, and I could see David through the kitchen's pass-through window, barking orders at his sous chef. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, his chef's whites were wrinkled, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept. Good. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a glass of wine, positioning myself where David would have to see me when he eventually came out of the kitchen. I didn't have to wait long. Sophia? His voice was hoarse. What are you doing here? Having lunch at my husband's restaurant? Is that not allowed? David glanced around nervously at the other customers. We need to talk, privately. I think we covered everything last night, don't you? Please. 5 minutes. In my office. Against my better judgment, I followed him to the small office behind the kitchen. The space was cramped and cluttered, dominated by a desk covered in invoices and vendor contracts. On the wall hung a photo of David and me at the restaurant's grand opening, both of us grinning with pride and possibility. Sophia, last night, was perfect, I interrupted. Last night was exactly what it needed to be. It was humiliating, for all of us. You're right, it was humiliating. But you know what was more humiliating? Finding out about your affair through forgotten emails. Realizing that while I was working overtime to support your dreams, you were busy creating a whole other life behind my back. David sat heavily in his desk chair. I know you're angry. Angry? I laughed. David, I'm way past angry. Angry was 3 weeks ago when I first found those emails. Now I'm just done. Don't say that. We can work through this. Couples therapy. Counseling. No. The word came out harder than I intended. We can't work through this because you don't actually want to work through it. You want to manage it. You want to find a way to keep both me and Jessica happy while changing as little as possible about your own behavior. David's face flushed. That's not true. Isn't it? Tell me, David, are you planning to stop seeing Jessica? The pause before his answer told me everything I needed to know. It's complicated, he finally said. No, it's really not. Either you want to save our marriage or you want to be with her. You can't have both. I love her. 3 words that ended 15 years of marriage. Not shouted in anger or whispered in passion, but stated like a simple fact. I love her. Present tense, active voice, unambiguous. Then you've made your choice, I said calmly. And I've made mine. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick folder. These are copies of all the financial documents related to this restaurant. Loan agreements, partnership papers, tax returns, everything that shows my involvement in funding and establishing this business. David's eyes widened as I placed the folder on his desk. According to our prenup, which you insisted on, by the way, I'm entitled to half of any business assets acquired during our marriage. Since Martinelli's was opened 2 years ago using joint funds and my credit, that makes me a 50% owner. Sophia, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You want to start a new life with Jessica? Fine. But you're going to buy me out of this restaurant first. Fair market value, as determined by an independent appraiser. David stared at the papers like they might bite him. You know I don't have that kind of money liquid. The restaurant is barely breaking even. Then you have a problem, don't you? This is vindictive. You're trying to destroy everything I've worked for. No, David. I'm trying to get what I'm legally entitled to. If that destroys what you've worked for, then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to destroy what we worked for together. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. Actually, there's something else you should know, I said, standing up from the chair across from his desk. Remember how you always said I was too focused on my career to pay attention to what was really important? David nodded warily. Well, it turns out that career focus has some advantages. For instance, it means I have connections in the media. Local news specifically. The color drained from David's face. What did you do? I gave an interview this morning about infidelity in small business relationships, the challenges of supporting a spouse's entrepreneurial dreams, and what happens when personal betrayal affects professional partnerships. You didn't. The reporter was very interested in the human interest angle. A successful lawyer who funded her husband's restaurant dream, only to discover he was using the business as a backdrop for his affair. Very compelling stuff. David's hands were shaking now. Sophia, the restaurant can't survive that kind of publicity. You'll destroy both of us. I'll be fine. I have my own practice, my own reputation. You, on the other hand, have a restaurant that depends on local goodwill and repeat customers. How do you think your clientele will feel about dining at a place owned by someone who publicly humiliated his wife? This is insane. You're destroying everything out of spite. I'm protecting myself and my interests. You should try it sometime. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and David. Jessica called me this morning. What? She wanted to meet for coffee. Woman to woman, she said. She has some things she wants to tell me about your relationship. Apparently, last night opened her eyes to a few things about your character that she hadn't noticed before. David's face went white. What kind of things? I guess you'll find out. We're meeting this afternoon. That was a lie, of course. Jessica hadn't called me. But the look of panic on David's face was worth the deception. Let him spend the day wondering what secrets his girlfriend might spill, what promises he'd made to her that contradicted the promises he'd made to me. I left the restaurant and drove to my law office, where I spent the afternoon putting the final pieces of my divorce strategy in place. David would fight the business valuation, but he'd lose. The paperwork was ironclad, and I had the best family law attorney in the city representing me. My phone rang around 4 o'clock. David, Sophia, please. Can we talk reasonably about this? I thought we were past the talking stage. The news story. You can stop it, right? Call the reporter back? Tell them you changed your mind? Why would I do that? Because despite everything, we meant something to each other once. 15 years has to count for something. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You're right, I said. 15 years does count for something. It counts for half of everything you own, including the restaurant. It counts for maximum alimony payments. It counts for me getting the house, the cars, and the vacation property in Vermont. Sophia, it also counts for me not caring whether your new relationship survives the fallout from your choices. You burned our marriage down, David. I'm just making sure you don't get to walk away from the ashes unscathed. I hung up and turned my phone off. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my living room, soon to be my former living room, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a woman who thought she had a solid marriage and a bright future. Now I was a woman planning to rebuild her entire life from scratch. The house felt different with David gone. Quieter, but somehow more peaceful. I realized I'd been walking on eggshells for months without even knowing it, trying to accommodate a man who was already halfway out the door. My phone, which I'd turned back on to check messages, rang. Marcus. How? Are you holding up? He asked. Better than expected. You? The same, actually. I moved out today, got a hotel room while I figure out what's next. Good for you. Sophia, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you regret it? What we did last night? I thought about it for a moment. No. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. They needed to face the consequences of their choices. I keep thinking about what Jessica said, about me being emotionally unavailable. Marcus, don't do that to yourself. Don't let her rewrite history to make her affair your fault. But what if there's some truth to it? What if I could have been a better husband? Maybe you could have been. Maybe I could have been a better wife. But that doesn't justify what they did. Being unhappy in a marriage doesn't give you the right to cheat. It gives you the right to have an honest conversation, to try counseling, or to ask for a divorce. It doesn't give you the right to lie and sneak around and make your spouse feel crazy for suspecting something. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You're right. Thank you for that. We're going to be okay, Marcus. It doesn't feel like it right now, but we're going to be okay. After we hung up, I walked through the house one more time, turning off lights and checking locks. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of separating my life from David's, untangling 15 years of shared decisions and joint accounts. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. The waiting was over. The pretending was over. The marriage was over, and I was still standing. My phone buzzed with one final text message of the day. From an unknown number, but I recognized the tone immediately. You destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. I typed back quickly. I didn't destroy anything, David. I just refused to pretend it wasn't already broken. Then I blocked the number and went to bed. 6 months later, Marcus and I met for coffee on a Saturday morning. We'd stayed in touch through our respective divorce proceedings, offering each other support and advice as we navigated the legal and emotional complexity of ending our marriages. The restaurant sold, I told him. David couldn't afford to buy me out, so we sold it to a chain. I got my half of the proceeds. And Jessica? Moved back to her hometown after the divorce was finalized. Apparently, small-town scandal doesn't travel well. Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Do you think they're still together, David and Jessica? I doubt it. Relationships that start with betrayal rarely survive the transition to daylight. Plus, Jessica got to see the real David under pressure. The charming facade tends to crack pretty quickly when things get difficult. Good, Marcus said, and I was surprised by the vehemence in his voice. I'm sorry, that's petty of me. No, it's honest. And honesty is something we're both entitled to now. We sat in comfortable silence, two people who had survived the destruction of their marriages and come out stronger on the other side. I have news, Marcus said eventually. I'm dating someone. That's wonderful. Tell me about her. Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher, divorced, has 2 kids. She's nothing like Jessica. She's honest and straightforward, and she laughs at my terrible jokes. She sounds perfect. What about you? Any romantic prospects? I smiled. I'm focusing on myself right now, learning who I am when I'm not trying to be half of something else. It's surprisingly liberating. I can imagine. We finished our coffee and walked out into the bright morning sunshine. The future felt full of possibilities in a way it hadn't for years. Thank you, Marcus said as we reached our cars. For everything. For having the courage to confront them. For including me. For helping me find my own strength. Thank you for being brave enough to face the truth with me. I couldn't have done it alone. We hugged goodbye, and I drove home to my new apartment, smaller than the house I'd shared with David, but entirely mine. The walls were painted colors I'd chosen, the furniture arranged exactly how I liked it, and there were no secrets hidden in forgotten email accounts. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone was silent, my conscience was clear, and my future was my own. For the first time in 15 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, and it felt like victory. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.